Recently, the Supreme Court denied review of both rifle and magazine ban cases, and they said that they would potentially be interested in a number of cases that they identified, maybe in a term or two, and that they would be watching them closely. Well, one of those cases was just actually taken by the Third Circuit En Banc panel for review. They actually snatched it from the lower court, who had already heard oral arguments, but they did not give them an opportunity to actually rule in the case. Instead, they're going to review and decide the rifle and magazine ban issue on their own. So let's talk about what is now happening in this critical challenge. Now, before we jump into this video, if you guys want to support the channel, of course, subscribing is a great way to do that. Also, just double check to make sure YouTube has not unsubscribed you, because they love to do that. And then also you can check out the free legal guide that we have available for you guys. That will be linked down below in the detail section and also in the pinned comment. And then you can also check out my website, armscholar.com, where we have a lot of things available for you guys as well. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, I'm going to be discussing two critical cases which challenge a state's ban on so-called assault weapons and then also magazine bans as well. However, now we have a very surprising update. The Third Circuit En Banc panel on their own, so essentially sua sponte, decided to take review of this case from the three-judge panel, and they've decided to hear oral arguments en banc and rule on it on their own. Now, this could be good because it moves the case one step closer to a final merits decision and a final merits case that the Supreme Court has actually expressly said that they would be watching. And now the Third Circuit En Banc panel is going to review this, and they have issued pro 2A decisions in a recent history, especially in cases like the Range versus Garland issue. So they've issued pro 2A decisions en banc recently, and this could potentially be another one. Now, this case involves the state of New Jersey's ban on so-called assault weapons and also their magazine ban. Now, when it comes to the magazine ban back in 2018, New Jersey passed Assembly Bill 2761, which banned the possession of firearms magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. Now, in August of 2018, the district court reviewed this case, denied ANJRPC's motion for a preliminary injunction, and at that time, they applied the flawed two-step analysis. But then at that time, essentially what ended up happening is this went to the Supreme Court on the final merits based on the summary judgment, and that was back in 2022. And later, what ended up happening, of course, as we know, the Supreme Court issued the Bruin decision, which corrected the type of analysis that should be issued in these types of cases. So this ANJRPC case was granted, vacated, and remanded by the Supreme Court back down to the district court for a new decision in light of Bruin. The district court then reviewed and issued a new decision, which again, like I mentioned, was a flawed decision because it kind of had this hodgepodge analysis trying to apply Bruin, but really the court there, you could see, did not actually want to follow what the Supreme Court said. In that ruling, the district court judge stated that it's hard to accept the Supreme Court's pronouncements that certain firearms policy choices are off the table when frequently radical individuals possess and use these same firearms for evil purposes. Despite that, the court stated that it was bound to have to follow the ruling, but as a result, it kind of issued once again that hodgepodge decision protecting only limited sets of rifles while at the same time ignoring other types of firearms and then also upholding the magazine ban in the state. But that horrible ruling is now in the Third Circuit, and actually on July 1st, it was in front of a three-judge panel in the Third Circuit, and they held oral arguments in the case. The pro 2A side argued that these bans can't stand because millions of Americans already own these firearms and these types of magazines for lawful purposes, which means that they are protected under the text of the Second Amendment. The state of New Jersey pushed back against that, saying that just because something is popular doesn't mean it's constitutionally protected, and they pointed to history where dangerous and unusual weapons like Bowie knives and machine guns were restricted potentially, so they tried to combat those types of common use arguments. Now, during the oral arguments, the judges there seemed very split. Some were worried about turning the Second Amendment test into kind of a popularity contest, while others kind of questioned why common rifles used by millions of individuals in America should be banned by states like New Jersey. From the tone of the court, it seemed like that maybe they would strike down some aspects of the ban there in the state of New Jersey, but maybe they would focus on just AR-15s like the lower court did. Maybe they would just focus on magazines in question. It seemed like they could have ruled that an outright ban would be improper or tried to at least limit the ruling, keep it narrow, and force the lower court on remand to re-review the issue and maybe look at the broader issues and other rifles and shotguns, handguns, which it ignored. So it seemed like maybe there was an opportunity where the three-judge panel there could issue a pro 2A decision or maybe not. However, all of that has really changed. Before the 3-judge panel could actually rule on this issue, the En Banc panel on their own has now issued a notice that they will take review of this case and will hear oral arguments on October 15th. So the notice of the En Banc panel in the Third Circuit states that the court sua sponte, which means on their own, orders rehearing en banc in the above captioned cases. The clerk of the court shall list the matter for Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. Now, the judges who will hear the case en banc are Chagares, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, that's the chief judge, Hardiman, Schwartz, Kraus, Restrepo, Bibas, Porter, Mady, Phipps, Freeman, Montgomery Reeves, Chung, and then also Smith. Now, with this makeup of the En Banc panel, the court is 7 Republican appointees and 6 Democrat appointees. Now, another thing that I want to mention that's interesting is that Judge Smith is a senior judge and he elected to participate as a member of the En Banc court, which actually sways the court to lean towards Republicans. So 7 Republican appointees and then 6 Democrats. This is also interesting because Judge Smith has recently been on pro tuae decisions like the 18-21 Pennsylvania concealed carry case, which was won in favor of the pro tuae side, and that was back in January. Also, it's important to note that the Third Circuit En Banc panel recently issued pro tuae rulings like the one in Range versus Garland. And in that case, they found that Brian Range should not be prohibited for life from having guns or possessing firearms simply because he lied on a food stamp form essentially 20 years ago. So they ruled in the pro tuae side on that case. Also, I want to mention that Judge Arena Freeman, who is a Biden appointee, she did side with the pro tuae side on that Range decision. So even though she was a Democrat, she still ruled on the pro tuae side in the Range case. So this is a very interesting makeup and a very interesting move by the En Banc panel to take review of this case on their own. This will now be argued in front of the En Banc panel in the Third Circuit on October 15th. So very soon they're going to hear arguments in this case. We're going to be watching this closely to see how this plays out during those arguments. We'll be able to kind of get a good sense of how the court is leaning and maybe how some of the judges are going to rule based on the questions that they're going to ask. What I'm going to be curious about is if some of the judges find issue with the lower court isolating its decision to just AR-15s while ignoring all the other banned firearms and rifles, shotguns, and handguns. Also, it's going to be interesting to see maybe how the court addresses the fact that the district court found that magazines are protected arms but could still be banned by the state of New Jersey. The good thing about all of this is that now this case moves essentially one step closer to Supreme Court review. It's a final merits case on rifles and magazines. The magazine aspect of this has been GVR'd in the past by the Supreme Court after Bruin. And also, this is a case the Supreme Court stated that they are going to be watching closely when Kavanaugh mentioned that they would need to take a rifle ban case probably in the next term or two. So this is one of those cases that they identified that they would be watching in the circuit courts. So this case and this appeal in front of the En Banc panel has now become very important, and this is one of those cases that is aiming to end state bans on rifles and magazines. So as we get more information, as this develops more, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that, of course, is to subscribe to the channel. Also, you can check out the free legal guide that I have available for you guys. Again, link down below in the details section in the pinned comment. Or you can find it over on my website, armscholar.com, where we have other things like channel merch and other things that you can check out. But as always, thank you guys so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by Arm Scholars, and this nation will be maintained by Arm Scholars.